The most intense fighting took place in a few major cities like Kharkiv, Mariupol, Kherson, and outside the capital, Kyiv. But by April, a few weeks into the war, Russia had failed to capture Kyiv or Kharkiv. It did control a large swath of territory, though, and continued to fight the Ukrainian army on three main fronts: in the northeast, in the east, and in the south, where it did control Kherson. That's when the second phase began. From about April to August, this map changed very little. Russia, for the most part, stopped conducting large, sweeping attacks, and instead relied on its artillery to pound Ukrainian positions. But the Russian army was in bad shape. The US government estimates that as many as 80,000 Russian soldiers have been killed or wounded.
It was very, very devastating for them, particularly since the losses they were taking early in the war were in the best of the Russian military. The easy comparison is by this summer, the Russians had lost more men than the Soviets did in nearly a decade of the war in Afghanistan.
So during the summer, Russia used the time to recruit more soldiers, but it didn't go well.
A fascinating element of this is that the Kremlin still is calling this a special military operation. It cannot be referred to as a war. That actually matters because the Russians haven't called up conscripts for this invasion, and instead they're trying to fill these gaps with these various ad hoc methods.
The Russians have had to hire more mercenaries and offer payments to prisoners. They've even raised the age limit to allow men over 40 to join the army. And Russia sent many of these men with little training to the front lines.
So it's led to a steady drop-off in the quality of Russian personnel throughout the war.
But while Russia struggled to rebuild its army, Ukraine had the opposite problem.
There was actually a sort of a bottleneck in May where they had too many recruits and not enough instructors to train them, which is a very good problem to have.
With the help from its Western allies, Ukraine was able to quickly train lots of these men before sending them to the front.
That has really helped the Ukrainian military not just produce more soldiers, but very effective soldiers, better than the Russians.
By the end of August, they were ready for the next phase of the war, their own attack. Throughout the summer, Ukrainian leaders talked a lot about their plans to launch an attack. And they made it pretty clear that they would strike here, Kherson, key to control of the south. Ukraine moved many of its troops into position near the city and used their most advanced artillery to hit the Russians for weeks. They were forcing the undermanned Russian army to make a choice: